Hello and welcome to Talking Tsundoku Blues. My name is Chris. If you've been watching this channel, you may have seen our last video where my partner Jasmine and I talked about the book Hiroshima by John Hersey. And we used this as a jumping off point to talk about how now, on the 80th anniversary of the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, most of the memories, the first-hand memories of survivors and people who were involved have mostly disappeared because people are getting old and passing away. And so we talked about narrative and storytelling and made a little video about that. So today I wanted to make a companion video, and I wanted to talk about a book that really changed my view of Japan's role in World War II and really kind of shocked me, and a book I still think about all the time, even though I've only read it once. But I've recommended it to many people, and it's really an important book that, of all the books that I've read, it's a really important one, and that is Hirohito and the Making of Modern Japan by Herbert P. So most of us who grew up, paying attention in history class will remember the broad strokes of Japan's role in World War II, from Pearl Harbor to the Battle of Midway to, of course, the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But somewhere in the background, there's this kind of distant, unknowable, ceremonial figure, this kind of impotent figurehead, known as Hirohito, but in Japan, actually, he's known as Emperor Showa. You want to be a little bit careful about how you refer to him if you talk to Japanese people. He painted himself as someone who was swept up in, the militarization of Japan, and he was carried along by the waves of warmongering and just carried along by the times, helpless to do anything about what was happening around him. But Herbert Bix's book will completely shatter that image of the emperor and show him as actually very much involved, very much working behind the scenes, from the Manchurian incident and the Japanese invasion of Manchuria to Pearl Harbor, and of course after the atomic bombs, still hesitating to end the war. This isn't just a biography, this isn't just a life story. It's about the debunking of a myth. It all comes down to one uncomfortable truth, that Hirohito's entire identity, the emperor's entire public image, was a carefully crafted fiction. This is just an absolutely fascinating book. If you read only one book about Japan's role in World War II, I would recommend that this would be the book. There are tons of books out there about Japan during World War II, about the Pacific Theater, probably more than a ton. If you stack them all up and weighed them, it would probably be several tons of books, literally. But this book has such a great overview, such a great look behind the scenes into what was going on at that time. And so let me talk about this a little bit today. So Herbert P. Bix, he's a Pulitzer Prize winning historian. I think this is his first book, but it won the Pulitzer Prize. It was published in the year 2000. This is a paperback that came out in 2001. He had access to all kinds of Japanese sources, and in fact, in his acknowledgments, he talks about there was an extensive group of Japanese researchers, historians, including his own wife, who's Japanese, who helped him compile all of this information. And he did not have access to some of the key materials, such as Emperor Showa's diary, but he did have the journals and diaries of all of the aides around Emperor Showa, that is Hirohito. Hirohito was born in 1901, and his life spans almost the entire 20th century because he died in 1989, which is amazing. He was raised in a world that revolved around the imperial institution. From a young age, he was trained in the ideology that placed the emperor at the spiritual and political center of Japan. When he ascended the throne in 1926, he inherited a government already leaning toward militarism, and he learned quickly how to manage factions, keep military leaders close, and maintain ultimate authority. Hirohito was fully aware of atrocities like the massacre at Nanking, or Nanjing, but he never intervened to stop them. He basically allowed the Army and Navy to do whatever they wanted. Actually, to the point where during World War II, there was actually some moments, some actually very interesting moments in here where naval commanders and the army commanders, even the Air Force, are not talking to each other and not coordinating strategy. They're all just going off on their own, and Hirohito just lets them do whatever they think is best. He does participate, but he also can't really control them. It's kind of bizarre. His balancing act was basically to allow the military to expand Japan's sphere of influence while maintaining authority and making sure that no one stepped over the line too far, even though at a certain point he was kind of helpless to stop what had become full-scale escalation into World War II. He didn't micromanage his generals, but he did shape strategic decisions, especially on when to fight and when to withdraw. And by late 1941, Japan faced the impossible choice of backing down on their imperialistic expansion or face the United States in full-scale war. Perhaps the most controversial point in this book is that the emperor delayed surrender for such a long time, even after he knew, he must have known, that it was hopeless to continue the war. He even waited through the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. He waited until the Soviet Union entered the war, until he finally declared defeat and surrendered to the Allied forces. His famous broadcast, where millions of people all over Japan heard the emperor's voice on the radio for the first time, announcing his decision to surrender, was actually a calculated decision to preserve the monarchy, even though at the time it was painted as, his glorious message to the people and him, bringing hope at a time when there was no hope. But this was the beginning of his post-war reshaping of his own image. Talking about how on December 7th, 1947, 6 years after the Pearl Harbor attack and 26 months after the end of the war, Hirohito and his party arrived at atom-bombed Hiroshima. The streets had been specially cleaned and dusted for the occasion. Wearing a dark gray Homburg and clothes that, in the opinion of an Australian observer, might have been deliberately chosen so as not to be too much on the smart side. He seemed to symbolize the down-at-the-heels but determined look characteristic of present-day Japan. Thousands of adults and children lined the long, meticulously planned route of his motorcade into the city. At the first stop, war orphans in black robes were on their knees waiting for him. There was a person there who was explaining what happened, and many of the people had the flash burns, the keloid scars on their faces. Hirohito listened patiently, and he's kind of said, oh, is that so? So desu ka, kind of thing. And then he made a move to go speak into the microphone. But at the last moment, he turned and went back to his car very quickly, at which point the crowd surged ahead, trampling the police and the security. Just to touch his car was enough for them. And it kind of shows that he was extremely uncomfortable in the years following the war. He did do tours all over the place. He did give speeches, but he often was physically far removed from the people. And he would give these dry speeches and then immediately, disappear back into his motorcade and go on to the next. At the very beginning, you can see how uncomfortable he was at, looking upon what had happened. So that was also really interesting and kind of moving and devastating, and just, it stayed with me long after I read this. I read this book many years ago, and I still think about some of those scenes. So as I mentioned, Hirohito was not a powerless figurehead. He was an active participant in shaping military strategy, state policy, and also wartime decision-making. There's also a really fascinating part in here about the use of biological weapons, which is something that is not talked about much when it comes to Japan's role in World War II. And this goes into the details of Unit 731, which is a terrifying group of Japanese soldiers who were in China and experimenting with biological weapons. Hirohito was a man of science, and Herbert P postulates that although there is no evidence directly linking him to the use of biological weapons on the Chinese population, he was aware of all of the orders that were coming across his desk, and he was seeing everything that was going on, so why wouldn't he have approved these? Detailed directives of the Imperial Headquarters that the Army Chief of Staff issued to the Kwantung Army Command in charge of biological warfare, Unit 731, were as a rule shown to the Emperor, and the Army orders of the Imperial Headquarters Army on which such directives were based were always read by him. Biological weapons continued to be used by Japan in China until 1942, but the full consequences of this Japanese reliance on both chemical and biological warfare would come only after World War II. First, in the Truman administration's investment in a large biological and chemical warfare program, partly based on transferred Japanese BC discoveries and technology. Second, in the massive American use of chemical weapons in Vietnam. Yeah, these kinds of revelations absolutely shocked me and terrified me. I know that German scientists were brought into the United States after World War II, and that a lot of the technology that the United States has still now and had developed after the war came from gathering up all of the brain trust of other countries post-war, because to the victor go the spoils. But the fact that Japan pioneered the use of biological weapons that evolved into what was used in Vietnam, it's just, man, you got to kind of sit with that for a minute. Like, the wartime and post-war image of him as a detached monarch was constructed by both Hirohito himself as well as the Allies, led by General MacArthur. And that was in order to stabilize Japan and the Japanese people's belief in the emperor, which had been so strong during the war. And from America's eyes, it was also to prevent communism. So by not putting him on trial for war crimes and allowing him to become the puppet of the United States, it was kind of a win-win situation. He was able to sort of construct a new public image as this helpless actor who was swept up in the militarization, and the United States could use him to shape future policy and get the Japanese to basically fall in line for the most part. Of course, not everyone believed it, and not everyone was blind to the illusion. There were many people that saw right through the illusion, but in the times after the war, shit was complicated. And so, there were a few minority voices who would actually belittle and make fun of and satirize the emperor, such as in this magazine Shinso number 40, which is April 1st, 1950. Hirohito standing there doffing his hat on a ground of human skulls in the limelight. He lived until 1989, and he saw Japan become the economic powerhouse that it still is. Although he never saw the 1980s economic bubble burst in the 90s. He was able to pass away before he saw that depression set in. He never publicly accepted responsibility for the war, and in fact in his later years was seen as a very kind of a pointless and impotent monarch. You can see a picture of him here in 1975 touring Disneyland alongside Mickey Mouse. He even signed the visitor's book and acquired a Mickey Mouse wristwatch. Yes, this book is very, very fascinating. There's so many things in here that I haven't even begun to mention, but I wanted to make a short little video as a companion to our Hiroshima and the End of Memory. This book forces us to reconsider how Japan's war was fought from the very top down. It's a great example of how history is written by those in power and how political convenience can rewrite a nation's memory. Reading this book gives you the context that you usually don't find in standard World War II biographies, because Bix connects the pre-war, wartime, and post-war eras so perfectly through this one man and all of his influence and all of the people around him. If you've only ever learned about World War II from history class, then again, I would highly recommend this book. And also, connecting to my other video, I think the power of narrative is a very, very powerful tool. It was used by John Hersey very effectively in Hiroshima. Not a political book, but just showing 6 people who lived through the atomic bomb beforehand, their daily routines and their daily lives, as well as the shocking aftermath of everything that they went through. This similarly has an incredible narrative of the decisions of one man and how the entire 20th century was changed. This is a massive tome, but at the same time, it's worth the read. If you read just one book, let this be it. And if you have read this book, I would love to hear from you. What did you think about it? Did it change your mind? Or were you like, oh, it was really dense and I couldn't understand? Or, oh my God, I can't believe like the horrors that, that were carried out on account of this emperor. Yeah, I'd like to know. So as always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again.